When the hurt stops hurting, a story told from the inside of a life that went wrong. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. I want you to do something difficult. I want you to stay with a story that is going to make you uncomfortable. A story told from a perspective you may not want to occupy, a perspective you may have been on the receiving end of, in which case I want to tell you, before this story goes another sentence, that what was done to you was wrong, completely, entirely wrong. And nothing in this story will suggest otherwise. But I also believe, and this is why the story exists, that understanding how a person becomes what they become is not the same as excusing them for it. Understanding is not absolution. It is something else. It is the beginning of prevention. And it is, for the man at the center of this story, the beginning of something he did not believe was possible for a person like him. His name is Gerard Whitfield. He is 44 years old. He is currently in the second year of a 4-year sentence at a correctional facility in Georgia. He asked me to tell this story. He said, "Tell it from the beginning. Don't skip the parts that make me look bad. Tell all of it. Because the parts that make me look bad are the parts that might help someone else." So we begin at the beginning. Before we move forward with the story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help us to grow this channel to uplift more people. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, the second of 3 boys in a house on Whitfield Street, which was not named after us, but which we claimed anyway. The way kids claim things that give them a sense of belonging. My father's name was Eugene. Big man, broad, the kind of presence that rearranged a room when he walked into it. He worked at the plant and he came home tired, and he loved us in the way that men who were never shown how to love demonstrate love. Through provision and presence and the occasional moment of warmth that was so unexpected and so bright that you held on to it for weeks afterward. He also had a temper. I want to be careful how I describe this because I am not telling this story to blame my father. I am telling it because what I absorbed in that house on Whitfield Street became the blueprint I operated from. And I operated from it for 20 years without ever holding it up to the light and examining it. My father was not a man who apologized. He was not a man who discussed his interior life. When something went wrong, at work, with money, with us, the response was force, not always physical. Sometimes it was the kind of force that lives in a voice, in a silence, in the particular way a man can fill a room with something that makes everyone in it smaller. My mother, Bernice, was a gentle woman who had learned to make herself small. She moved around my father's moods with the practiced fluency of someone who had been doing it for a long time and had gotten very good at it. She was not weak. She was strategic. She loved us with everything she had in the spaces between, but she did not protect us from the blueprint. Nobody did. I watched my father handle every conflict with force. I watched my mother manage every conflict by disappearing. And I grew up believing, without anyone ever saying it directly, that this was how men and women worked in relation to each other. I was 9 when I made my first fist at another boy. I was 12 when I understood that making someone afraid of you was a form of control, and that control was a form of safety. I want you to understand what I mean by that. That for a boy in a house where the unpredictable thing was the most frightening thing, the ability to be the one holding the unpredictability rather than absorbing it was not a moral choice. It was a survival strategy, a very wrong one, with consequences I could not yet see. But from the inside of that childhood, it felt like the only armor available. I wore that armor out of the house on Whitfield Street and into the rest of my life. I never took it off. There is something else, something I did not tell anyone until I was sitting in a correctional facility in Georgia, in a therapeutic program I had initially attended only because it reduced my restricted hours. Listening to a facilitator talk about the connection between unaddressed childhood experiences and adult behavior. I was 14 when something happened to me. I'm not going to describe it in detail. I will say that it was at the hands of an older male in a position of trust, and that it lasted for a period of months, and that it ended only because we moved I told no one. I told no one because I was 14 and male, and the culture of Macon, Georgia in the late 90s did not have language for what had happened to a boy like me from a family like mine. There was no framework in which I could have said what happened and been met with the response it required. So I filed it somewhere that did not have a label. I filed it with everything else that did not have a label. My father's temper, my mother's disappearing, the specific shame of being small in a house that required smallness from the wrong people. And I built the armor thicker. The anger that came out of me in my teenage years had a source I did not understand and could not name. I was known as someone you did not push. I was known as someone with a short fuse and a long memory. The reputation gave me something that felt like safety. People did not surprise me because they were watching themselves around me. I mistook that for strength for 20 years. It was not strength. It was a wounded boy in a very large coat. Her name was Tamara. We were together from 19 to 22. I loved her. I want to say that plainly because it is true, and because people sometimes assume that men like me don't actually love the people we damage. I did love her. I was also, at 19, the full product of everything I had absorbed and nothing I had processed, which made my love something dangerous without my knowing it. The first time I raised my voice at Tamara was 6 months in. She had made plans with a friend without telling me first. The response I had, the volume, the edge in it, frightened her. I could see it in her face. I did not like what I saw in her face. Not because I was ashamed of frightening her, because seeing her frightened reminded me of something I had spent 5 years trying not to remember. I apologized. I was genuinely sorry. I held her and I meant it. 3 months later, it happened again. The cycle. I know now. From the program, from the books, from the facilitator who explained it with the patience of someone who has explained it many times to men who needed to hear it. The cycle has a name. Tension builds, an incident, remorse and repair, a period of calm, tension builds again. The wheel turns. I turned that wheel in every relationship I was in from 19 to 34. Tamara left at 22. She left the way women leave when they have finally understood that the person they are with is not going to change. Quietly, with planning, with the specific resolution of someone who has made a decision and is not going to revisit it. I was devastated. I was also, within 4 months, in a new relationship with a woman named Keisha, in which I was, for approximately 6 months, the best version of myself I could access. Then the wheel started turning again. Keisha left at 26. Then there was Patrice, who left at 29. Each time I told myself the problem was the woman. Each time I had reasons. The reasons were detailed and internally consistent and completely wrong. I was 32 when I met my wife. Her name was Loretta Beaumont. She was 30 years old, a dental hygienist from Augusta, with the specific combination of warmth and competence that I found, at 32, more attractive than anything I had been drawn to before. She had a laugh that could reorganize a room. She was also, and I say this with the full weight of what it means, exactly the wrong person to be with me at that stage of my life. Not because of anything in her, because of everything in me that I had not yet examined, addressed, or even fully acknowledged. We dated for 2 years. I was on my best behavior, which was not performance exactly, but was the version of me that existed when my anxiety was low and the armor was not yet threatened. She knew I had a temper. I had told her I was working on it. She had seen the edges of it twice, and both times I had managed the aftermath well enough that she believed the pattern was improving. We married at 34. The first year was the best year. The second year was when the armor started feeling threatened again. By the ordinary stresses of a shared life. By financial pressure. By a job situation that did not go as I expected. By the specific vulnerability of being fully known by another person, which I had never learned to tolerate. The controlling behavior started small. Her schedule, who she spent time with, the way she dressed. I had reasons for all of it. I framed it as concern, as protectiveness, as love. I believed some of those framings. That is the thing I most need you to understand. I was not coldly calculating. I was a man in enormous unexamined pain, and the pain was driving behavior that I had learned to rationalize so fluently that I could not see it clearly. The raised voice became a pattern. The pattern escalated over 3 years. I will not describe the specifics in detail. I will say that by year 4, Loretta was living the same way my mother had lived on Whitfield Street, moving around my moods with the practiced fluency of someone who had been doing it long enough to get very good at it. The night I recognized my mother in my wife's face, something in me went cold. I did not stop, but I knew. The last night was in November. I had been laid off from my position 2 weeks earlier. I had not told Loretta because telling her required an admission of something I could not make. The money was tighter than I had communicated. The pressure had been building with the specific and familiar inevitability of something I had felt many times before, but had never been able to interrupt. She asked about a bill, a routine question. The kind of question a wife asks a husband in a shared household about a shared financial matter. What she received was not a routine answer. I will not describe the specifics of what I did. I will say that it was the worst night in 5 years of an increasingly harmful pattern. I will say that Loretta called 911. I will say that when the officers arrived, I was still in the house. I was arrested. I sat in the back of a patrol car in November with my hands behind me, looking at the house on Belmont Avenue through the window. And I had a thought that I had never allowed myself to have before. I thought, I am my father, not as accusation, as recognition, as the specific, horrifying clarity of a man who has spent 30 years building a wall between himself and the truth and has just watched the wall come down in a single November night. I am my father, and somewhere in the pattern I inherited and amplified and brought into a marriage with a woman who had done nothing to deserve any of it. Somewhere in all of that, I'm also the boy who never told anyone what happened to him. I sat in the back of the patrol car and felt all of it arrive at once. The facility was not what I expected. I expected what I had constructed in my imagination from movies and assumptions. Noise, threat, the requirement to reassemble the armor immediately and wear it constantly. Some of that was true, but there were also long hours of quiet that I had not anticipated. Long hours of quiet in which, for the first time in my adult life, I had nothing to manage. No household, no relationship to perform in, no professional identity to maintain, just me, alone with me. I had spent 42 years avoiding being alone with me. The first months were the worst, not because of the conditions, because of the interior noise. Everything I had filed without a label came out of the filing cabinet during those months. My father, my mother, Whitfield Street, the thing at 14, Tamara and Keisha and Patrice and Loretta, all of it, demanding, finally, to be looked at. I started a fight in the 3rd month. Old patterns looking for familiar outlets. I received a restriction I did not want and used the restricted hours in my cell to do the only available thing. I read. There was a Bible in the cell, not because I had asked for one. It was simply there, the way Bibles are simply there in certain places, placed by people who understand that there is a specific readership for a Bible that arrives without being requested. The person who has run out of every other option and has nothing left but the time to read it. I opened it at random, Psalm 51. I read it and felt something I had not felt in decades. Recognized, not condemned. Recognized. As if the man who wrote this psalm had looked around the same interior room I was sitting in and written down what he found there with complete accuracy. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. I had not had a pure heart in 42 years. I did not know if it was possible to have one now. I read the psalm 4 times. In my 6th month, I was assigned to a behavioral intervention program specifically designed for men convicted of domestic harm. I attended the first session intending to endure it. The facilitator was a man named Mr. Owens, late 50s, patient, with the specific calm of someone who had been in this room with this specific kind of man many times and had not been defeated by the experience. He did not treat us with contempt. He did not treat us with false warmth. He treated us as men who had done real and serious harm and who had, if we chose to engage honestly, the capacity to understand why and to become something different. I had heard that kind of language before. I had tuned it out before. This time I could not leave. The sessions covered things I did not have language for. The cycle of behavior, the role of unaddressed childhood experience, the specific way that men who were themselves harmed as children sometimes reproduce harm in their adult relationships if the original experience is never processed. Mr. Owens called it the wound that teaches the wrong lesson. I heard that phrase and put my hand flat on the table. The wound that teaches the wrong lesson. The thing at 14 had taught me that vulnerability was catastrophic. That being small in relation to someone with more power was the most dangerous possible position. It had taught me to ensure, in every relationship I was in for the next 27 years, that I was never in that position again. It had taught me to be the power. It was the wrong lesson. It had cost Loretta 4 years of her life. I sat in that room and felt the specific weight of what clarity costs, because clarity about this was not relief. It was grief. It was the grief of a man who can finally see clearly and who wishes, with everything in him, that he had seen this 20 years earlier. The facility had a chaplain. His name was Chaplain Daniel Foster, and he was affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a fact I had noticed without caring when I first arrived, and which I noticed differently in my 9th month when I knocked on his office door. He was 67 years old, small and precise, with reading glasses and the unhurried quality of a man who understood that nobody in this building was going anywhere quickly. I told him I had been reading Psalm 51. He said, "How long?" 3 months. He nodded, as if this was reasonable. "What do you hear in it?" I said, "A man who knows what he is, and who is asking to be made into something else." He said, "That's the most accurate reading of Psalm 51 I have heard in a long time." I told him about the program, about Mr. Owens, about the wound that teaches the wrong lesson. I told him about my father and about Whitfield Street and about the thing at 14 that I had filed without a label for 28 years. It was the first time I had said it out loud. I had expected. I do not know what I had expected. Some response calibrated to the disclosure. What I received instead was Chaplain Foster sitting very still and saying, after a long moment, "You have been carrying that alone since you were 14 years old." Not a question, a statement, a recognition. "Yes," I said. "That was not your fault," he said. "And it does not excuse what you did to Loretta." Both of those things are true simultaneously. I had not known that two things that seemed contradictory could both be true simultaneously. I had been operating for 42 years, as if the explanation was also the excuse. It is not. The explanation is the map. It shows you how you got here. The work is the navigation, choosing, from here, a different direction. I started meeting with Chaplain Foster every Wednesday. In my 14th month, I wrote Loretta a letter, not to ask for anything, not to attempt to re-enter her life, or to influence the legal proceedings, or to perform remorse for an audience. I wrote it because I owed her the truth and I had never given it to her. Not the real truth, not the underneath truth, not the explanation that was not an excuse. I wrote for 2 weeks before I had something I was willing to send. I told her about my father, about Whitfield Street, about the way I had absorbed a blueprint and operated from it without examining it. I told her about the thing at 14, not for sympathy. I told her because she had spent 4 years trying to understand why the man she had married was doing what he was doing, and she deserved to know that the answer was not her. It had never been her. I told her I was sorry with the specific precision that genuine remorse requires. Not, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," not, "I'm sorry things went wrong, but I'm sorry for what I did," specifically. And I understand if sorry is not sufficient, it never becomes sufficient. I told her I was in the program. I told her about Chaplain Foster. I told her about Psalm 51 and what I heard in it. I told her I was not the man she deserved to have married and that I hoped, wherever she was, that she was building something good. I sealed the letter. I did not know if she would read it. I sent it anyway, because the sending was not for her response. The sending was part of the becoming, the willingness to say the true thing even when there was nothing in it for me. In my 18th month, I received a visitor. I had received visits from my brother Marcus. No, we are not using that name. My brother Dion, who had come 3 times and who had the specific expression each time of a man who was holding complicated feelings about his sibling very carefully. The visitor in my 18th month was not Dion. It was a man I did not immediately recognize. Older, heavier than I remembered, with the particular posture of someone who has come to do something difficult and has decided to do it anyway. It took me a moment. It was my father. Eugene Whitfield was 71 years old and had driven from Macon, Georgia to a correctional facility in Georgia, and was sitting across a table from me in the visiting room with his hands folded and his eyes doing something I had never seen my father's eyes do. He said, "I heard you were in the program." "Yes, sir," I said. The sir was automatic. 44 years of it. He said, "I heard you were doing the work." "Yes, sir." He was quiet for a moment. He unfolded his hands and looked at them. He said, "I should have done the work a long time ago, before you." The room was loud around us. Visiting rooms always are. But between us, it was very quiet. He said, "What I showed you boys in that house was not how a man is supposed to be. I knew it was wrong. I didn't know how to be different." He looked up. "That is not an excuse." "I know it's not an excuse. I needed to tell you that I knew." I sat with my hands on the table. I thought about 9 years old in the first fist, 12 years old and learning that control was a form of safety. The armor built in that house on Whitfield Street carried out into every relationship for the next 30 years. I said, "Did anyone ever do the work with you, Dad? Did anyone ever sit with you in a room and help you figure out where it came from?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I didn't think it was something men did. I thought about the wound that teaches the wrong lesson. I thought about Loretta. I thought about my father's father, whom I had met twice and remembered as a man who spoke very little and whose silence felt like something to be careful around. I thought about how far back the wound went, and I thought about Psalm 51:10. Created me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Not in my grandfather's generation, not in my father's generation, not even fully yet in mine." But the request had been made, and the God who makes things new had received it. 2 years and 3 months into his sentence, Gerard Whitfield became a facilitator's assistant in the behavioral intervention program. Not a lead, not the man in front of the room, the man who set up the chairs, who stayed after to talk to the men who were not ready to talk during the session, who answered the questions that people don't ask in groups. He was not doing it to reduce his sentence, though it did. He was doing it because Mr. Owens had said in their first session something that had taken 2 years to fully land. The man who has been through the wound and has done the work of understanding it has something that no textbook can provide. He has the credibility of the experience. And there are men in this room who will only hear this from someone who has stood where they are standing. On a Wednesday evening in October, a man in his early 30s sat in the circle with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way of someone who has come to endure rather than engage. Gerard recognized the posture completely. He had worn it in this same room 21 months ago. After the session, he sat down next to the man. He said, "You don't have to say anything, but I want you to know I've been where you are, not somewhere similar. Here, in this room, with this specific armor on." The man looked at him. He said, "What changed?" Gerard thought about a Bible in a cell, about Psalm 51 read 4 times in the quiet of a restricted night, about a father sitting across a visiting room table with his hands unfolded and his eyes doing something new, about a letter he had sent that asked for nothing in return. He said, "I stopped trying to explain myself and started trying to understand myself. And then I stopped understanding myself as an endpoint and started asking God to make something new." The man was quiet. "Does it work?" he said. Gerard looked at him honestly. "It's not fast," he said, "and it's not painless. And the things you did don't go away, but you become someone who is genuinely different from the person who did them. And that difference is real." A pause. "I know because I know who I was, and I know who I am becoming. And they are not the same person." The man uncrossed his arms. It was a small thing. It was also exactly the right thing, because that is how it begins. not with a declaration, not with a dramatic conversion in a flash of light, with a man uncrossing his arms, with the smallest possible opening of the smallest possible door, and on the other side of that door, a God who had been waiting with the specific patience of one who knew all along that the knock was coming. Gerard Whitfield is a fictional man. The wound that taught him the wrong lesson is not fictional. It is one of the most documented and most tragic patterns in human behavior, the cycle in which unaddressed pain becomes behavior that creates pain in others, who carry it forward into their own relationships, who may reproduce it in their own children. The cycle is not inevitable. It is not destiny, but it will not interrupt itself. It requires a person willing to look at what they are carrying, the blueprint, the wound, the armor, all of it, with enough honesty to see it clearly and enough humility to ask for help changing it. Psalm 51:10 was written by a man who had done serious harm, who had looked at what he was and what he had done and had not minimized it, had not explained it away, had not performed remorse without substance. He had asked specifically for a new heart, not a corrected heart, not an improved heart, a pure heart, a renewed spirit, because he understood that what needed to change was not a behavior. It was the interior, the source, the place from which the behavior flowed. Here is what this story asks of its listeners. If you are a person who has caused harm, in a relationship, in a family, in any space where your unaddressed pain became someone else's burden, the story of Gerard Whitfield is not absolution. It is an invitation. The door that he eventually walked through is available to you, wherever you are, before your November night arrives. If you are a person who has received harm, who has been Loretta, who has been the child in the house on Whitfield Street, who has been the recipient of someone else's wound, your healing is not contingent on the person who harmed you doing the work. Your restoration belongs to you independently of what they choose. And if you are a parent, reading or listening to this, the blueprint is being read right now by the children in your house. They are learning, without being taught, what men and women do in relation to each other, what conflict looks like, what love looks like, what is safe and what requires armor. The most powerful thing you can do for the next generation is to deal with what you are carrying before you pass it on. The cycle can stop. It stops when someone decides that it stops here, with them, with this generation, with a heart that has asked to be made new and meant it. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. If you or someone you know is in a harmful relationship situation, National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. thehotline.org, available 24 hours, 7 days a week. If you are a man who recognizes yourself in this story and wants help, stop it now, 1-888-PREVENT. StopItNow.org. National Domestic Violence Hotline also serves people who cause harm and want to change. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified about more inspirational stories on redemption and hope.